Week 24, second grade, tree rings. Teachers, we're going to wrap up our unit on plants this week by studying some tree rings and some leaves that we have around our school and campus. And I have some real tree rings that your kids are going to use. And I'm going to show you how to count the years of the tree. Now, I will have these tree rings in a plastic sleeve because kids tend to make marks on them as they're looking at them with a pencil. And we don't want to mark up the tree with pencils because over the time you're just going to have a tree ring that's not very useful. So I'm going to have these inside a plastic sleeve, and they can use their point of their pencil to do the counting. This little circle right here in the middle is the germination of that seed out of the ground. So right there is the beginning of that tree. That would be like their birth date. They were born, this tree was born. And then we don't count this first ring right here. And you can see that there's almost a division of this line right here. So we're actually going to start counting right here. Now, they can do this two ways. They can count the light colored wood, or they can count the dark rings. It's going to be easier for them to count the dark rings. So let's start here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this tree is 12 years old. Now if we look at this one, we can see a big difference here. So let's count this one. We're going to count dark rings. So I'm not going to start with this right here because that's the germination, the beginning of the tree. So I'm going to start with that first ring right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This tree's 9 years old. But you know, this is sure a good comparison of two trees of two different sizes. But why does this one have so much more light colored wood in between the rings than this one? Well, you need to explain to kids that a tree ring will tell the scientists that are reading these tree rings what the climate was in that region for that period of time. Because this indicates, this light colored wood here indicates the amount of rainfall that was received that year. So we can tell by looking at this one that, you know, it's pretty even. So there wasn't a great deal of rainfall any one year, nor was there a drought. But on this one, we see lots of rainfall right here. Then we have like a pretty normal ring right here. But then we have a great big rainfall both of these years right here. And then back to regular normal rainfall. This right here might have been a drought. Kids could actually, you know, when they get older, go back and look at the records and see that there was a tremendous amount of rainfall maybe these 3 years in a row. And then it may have gone back to normal, or it may have been a drought. They'd have to know that. So that's what tree rings tell scientists. The outside of the ring is like their skin. It's their protection. If there's something wrong with the tree, for example, I have a picture of a tree right here that has some damage to it. Now this is just a piece of paper that I got off the internet. But something's happened to this tree right here. It could have been hit by lightning right here. There could have been a forest fire. This right here, this damage right in here. It could have been a tree fell over on it when it was very young. You can see it happen when it was a very young tree. And eventually maybe it rotted and fell off, and then it began its normal growth out here. And you can compare this to a little kid who maybe at 3 or 4 breaks his arm, but his body heals it up from the outside. Like you can't tell A year later, the kid had a broken arm, but if the doctor were to do an x-ray, he could still see the break in the arm. It's going to be there for the rest of his life. It's healed up, but the visible evidence is still there on the bone. So tell kids that this tells scientists a lot about what happened here in this area. So we're going to have some of these paper ones on the table. We're going to have some real tree rings that they can count. And then I also have a little activity with some leaves. I have 3 leaf, and you can actually lay leaves on a copy machine and copy them on a color copier. And that way you don't have to keep preserved leaves anywhere. They're just on a piece of paper and they look real. They are real. So I have 3 different leaves here that came from our schoolyard. And I have some of these little flip books that are fun for kids to kind of try to find out what those are. And what I did was I went through here. If they're flipping through all of this, they're going to find them towards the back. This is a loblolly pine, and that is there. Of course, it may be hard for them to identify. This one's eastern red cedar, and then this is a sycamore. And I'm just doing this to get them used to looking at leaves having different characteristics. But the scientists use that shape to identify. For example, I wouldn't look this leaf up right here by saying, well, maybe it's this leaf right here in this book, because it doesn't even have that shape. So shape is one of the reasons that we classify leaves. So we have this 5-star, we have needles, and then we have other needles. So I just thought I'd lay that on the table while we were doing trees. The last activity that we're going to do with kids is they're going to make their own tree ring. And we're going to start with a green dot right in the middle of our plate. And then I'm going to take my brown pen, I hope it's brown, or whatever pen you happen to have, and I'm going to start making rings. And this is 2nd grade, so they're about 7 to 8 years old. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I couldn't do mine very straight with my arms reached out there like that. But now I'm going to do some dating here. Like most of them probably know what day they were born. So let's say I was born 2/20/14. I'm going to put my birth date in that middle one. Then they're going to name some things that happened to them in their life. And you might help them get started because they're not going to remember this. But like you learned to walk your first year. Maybe they learned to talk their 2nd year. They're not going to remember that. They're going to think they were born talking. Then at 3, maybe they got a dog. And they probably don't have any memories of 3. At 4, maybe they got a bike. I don't know how old they are when they rode a bike. Maybe they went on a vacation when they were 5. Or another thing they could say is they started school. Started school. And I know it's going to be hard for them to write in their rings. And I'm doing this real messy because I'm reaching way away from my camera. And then that 6th year, maybe they lost their teeth. And maybe I need to add another ring. So I'm going to add me another ring, I see. So I really need my 7 rings. And maybe they started playing baseball or won baseball. Whatever their memory is, you know, you might have to help them along here. But they can put whatever they want on their rings. But start with their birthday and then help them through these. Then we need our student name on here. Up at the top. And then how old is their tree? Maybe their tree is 8 years old. So then we'll have some tree rings we can put out in the hall, and they can see what other kids do. Now you can change this writing around however you want, and they can certainly make it neater. But that's what we're going to do next week. Week 24, 3rd grade, tree rings. Teachers, we're going to wrap up our unit on plants this week by studying some tree rings and looking at some leaves and seeing what we can find out about what rings tell us on a tree. I have some, we call these tree cookies, and these are nice and smooth. I will tell you that they will be in plastic sleeves because kids, when they start to count, they tend to want to mark on the board itself, and we don't want pencil marks on them, so I'm going to put them inside a plastic sleeve so they can't make marks on them. But this, I'm going to show you how to read this, and then you can pass this on to the kids. This first little round part of this center of this tree ring is the germination and the beginning of growth for this tree. So that was the year it was born. And that's important because the kids are going to make tree rings later on of themselves, and they need to know that the center is when they were born. Then we go out and we start counting these dark rings. As this tree begins to grow, you get this white wood. The white wood means that there's plenty of water and the cells are reproducing quickly inside the tree. And then at the end of the growing season, just before it goes dormant, you get this dark wood. And then another season of growth, and then the dark wood. So what this tells you is when that tree has a lot of white wood in here, then there was a lot of moisture and rainfall that year, and it grew quicker. Then you get down here to a narrower band right here, and there wasn't as much rainfall that year. So this will tell a scientist, like when this they need to know when this tree was cut down, what the climate was for this ecoregion when this tree was living there. This is a pine tree here that we have here in East Texas. It's one of our fast-growing trees. When you get a piece of hardwood, it's real hard to read the rings because they're very close together, because a hardwood doesn't grow like our pine does. I have another tree cookie here. And this was an extremely fast-growing tree because the rings in it are extremely wide apart. So this was a fast growth, fast growth, fast growth, fast growth, and then it began to slow down. There wasn't as much moisture this year, these 3 years right here. The outside of the tree is the bark. There's a very delicate edge right here called the cambium that protects the tree, but the bark is like our skin. It protects it also. So, the kids can handle these. They can look at them. But like I said, I really want them to be in plastic sleeves because these are hard to come by. They're expensive now to buy, and we want to keep them for everybody without pencil marks on them. So they're just a good way for kids to learn about how to look at tree growth and know the climate. I also have something else that I'm going to have in the classroom for them. And this is the way scientists count the years of a tree without cutting it down. They can just go in with a borer and they can bore into the side of that tree and pull these little plugs out, and then they can count them. Like this is a real good one to count right here. Like this would be the center of the tree at the tree's birth. And then you'd count these dark rings. So that tells them, okay, maybe this year there was a lot of rainfall. So these came out of different trees. You wouldn't compare all these together. You would look at each one separately. But this is actually a tool here that foresters use to put what they call their borers in and take them back to their offices where they can look at this more closely. So I'm just going to have this for the kids to look at. It's not something I want them to pass around and handle. It's just because these are real delicate. They break very easily. And I've had this a number of years. Also, I had a really good website I found that had these colored tree rings on it. You can see they come from different places in the United States. They also tell you the time the tree was cut down. So this is a really good math problem to figure out at what point did that tree germinate if you know when it was cut. So that may be a math problem you want to work through. It would be a good way for the kids to think about, you know, how do scientists actually go about doing this. And then they could kind of relate some things like in history, like what happened back on the day this tree germinated. What's the year? So again, I would start counting on your dark rings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So this tree is 24 years old. So what was the year it was planted, or what year did it germinate? Then I have some others that they can do some comparisons to. You can look at these two right here and you could tell there was different amounts of rainfall at certain times. They could actually calculate the years that there was a lot of rain. Apparently something happened right here, and they need to know if there wasn't a lot of rain, what's that weather condition called? And then apparently at the end of its lifespan, it has real even rings, so apparently that's kind of like normal rainfall, with this being unusual right here. And then we have one from Boston, Massachusetts, and this tree has some damage to it. It has some marks on it, and kids are going to ask, well, what causes this right here? This could be a lightning strike. This could be a forest fire that did some damage. It could be an insect infestation. This right here, this happened when this tree was first germinating, just a young little sapling in the woods. Something happened to it to cause damage. This could have been another tree falling against it and leaning there for years. But look, it finally maybe rotted and fell off, and the tree started regaining its normal growth. But remember, bark around a tree is just like their skin. It's going to heal over any damage that's done if it doesn't kill the tree. It's just like a kid breaking his arm back here when he's 4. But when you look at him and he's 10 years old, you can't tell that. But a doctor who x-rays his body could see that break still. He'll always have that break on that bone when they x-ray him, but the outside of him looks normal and healthy. So that's a good way for kids to relate to trees, that when the damage is done to them, it's still internal, but on the outside they look okay. But this again goes back, it tells that it was harvested in 2000. So what year was that, did that seed germinate? So this is just a real good comparison we're going to do. I also have some leaves laying on the tables. I put these on a color copier. These are just real leaves that are copied. Good way to preserve your leaves. And I have these little flip books that are kind of fun for kids to look through and see that, well, I guess you look up the shape to determine what the leaf is. And these 3 leaves happen to be at the back of the book. This is a sweet gum. And then we have eastern red cedar here. And the last one is our little loblolly pine. That's kind of hard to do in this book because they didn't exactly take a picture of the needles straight on, but this is a pine right here. So this is just a good way for kids to relate to the forest around us, since we do live in the East Texas piney woods, looking through this little tree book. Hope you enjoy. Oh, one other thing, we're going to make our own tree cookie. We're going to give a paper plate. I went ahead and did this ahead of time. My writing became horrendous as I continued making bigger rings. And what I did is I took this paper plate, made me a green dot for the day I was born. I put my birth date right here. And then this is my first year, and I just made up these things. Kids can write whatever they want. You may have to help them, but first year kids learn to walk. Second year they might learn to talk. I just made up something for year number 3. They got a dog, or you could say I learned my ABCs or colors or something. Then I learned to ride a bike. Let them come up with their memories. Started school the 5th year. Lost my tooth 6th year. My family went to the Grand Canyon when I was 7. And 8, I was on the All-Star baseball team. So I just made up stuff, and they get to go back through their memories and get their thoughts on this plate. Put the student's name up here, how old this tree is, and then put these out in the hall so everybody can read them. It'd just be a good activity to take back to your classroom. Thank you. Week 24, 4th grade. Tree rings. Teachers, we're going to wrap up our unit on plants with some tree cookies and reading the rings of a tree and figuring out the age of it and what happened to the climate over a period of time. So what I'm going to have on the students' tables is a pine tree cookie. The Forest Service makes these for us here in Lufkin. And I will have these in plastic sleeves because I don't want the kids to take pencils and make marks on these, because over time they'll ruin the tree cookie. So they'll be in a plastic sleeve. I have different kinds. They're all pine